Very nothing that we feel ready. Stop the construction at the secondly, need to phase out for existing for assumption
Into practices, well, it's good to go to the separation.
Okay.
Okay,
So
I'm trying to get this. I don't know how we got it earlier as well.
can you now hear us, Imogen?
Yeah, can you hear me?
okay. Yep.
Yes, we can hear you, thank you.
We're nearly there. I mean, God knows what. Just why we just can't.
So I'm going to say a few words, just to corral everybody, and then we
I can only hear you if you speak right into the microphone, and then otherwise it's just background noise.
So I'll say a few words, and then we'll roll on to start.
Yes, and I'll be here and I'll do the slides. But you're okay. Yeah. 6 minutes each.
For some reason, you're not in the same meeting because we're also sharing it from the other side. Can I
This is
close?
yeah, please. This is the meeting with our presenter.
I see the view as well. The screen sharing is done from there.
So you,
They're going to do it from there. So
but they don't. But they don't have the presentation.
Yes.
They do have the presentation.
Yes, it's already shared, so you can see that.
Okay. So I need. So if we are controlling the presentation, should I come over there?
No, you
No.
can just say move next slide.
Okay.
So they can.
Can I just come and see? Because there are two versions. Which version? Yeah.
Hello everyone. Welcome. Good timing. Come and have a seat. And hello, hopefully, to our online watchers and participants as well. Welcome. So my name, for those who don't know me, is Catherine Leonard. I'm the Secretary General of the International National Trusts Organisation, into, which is an umbrella body for heritage organisations around the world. And you're going to be hearing a little bit more from me over the course of this session, which I'm really excited to be hosting in collaboration with our partners. I'm going to have to remind me, the environmental, here we go, sorry. The Environment and Culture Partners, I do apologise, Sarah, and the National Trust. So, welcome, come in. The organisations we work with around the world come together to share knowledge and experience. So what better day to be hosting this conversation than the ACE Day here at COP27. And without further ado, I will invite Her Royal Highness Princess Dana Faraz, who is the President of the Petra National Trust and also an INTU ambassador and co-chair of the Climate Heritage Network's Culture at COP working group, to say a few words. Thank you.
You just paused it.
Thank you, Princess Dana. Some really lovely words there, I think, about the importance of international collaboration in our work. And the event that Princess Dana referenced is actually happening on Thursday, on the 17th of November. And if you would like to be involved in that, do please leave us your details and we can send you the link so that you can sign up and come along to that important discussion on the 17th at 3 o'clock, 3 till 4 in the Blue Zone. So it's my great pleasure to now hand over to Skinder Hundal, who is the Director of Arts at the British Council.
Thank you, Catherine, and thank you very much to Into and all the surrounding sound in Tutankhamun here, and of course the National Trust for inviting me to join this panel session today. It's a real privilege to be at COP27, speaking in the deeper depths of the Blue Zone, the heart of global climate negotiations, and representing the British Council, UK's international organisation for cultural relations. As Director of Arts, I get to experience our work in the arts, culture and heritage around the world, and I see firsthand the power of art and cultural relations approaches in terms of building connections, building trust and understanding between people for better peace and prosperity. Recently I went to Kenya, Nairobi and Mombasa, for example, where I experienced the Cultural Protection Fund in action on the east coast, in the eastern coastline, in a sense to look at eroding areas and how local communities are working together in order to preserve the heritage of that location. I went to Mexico as well, Mondiacult, a big conference organised by UNESCO looking at cultural policy. And it was there we realised that by being together we could make a very big significant change in terms of thought leadership policy. Tomorrow I'm heading to Beirut and I'm looking at launching a festival called In Between, and it's really about how port cities recover during episodes which are unforeseen and how the festival of a city can be sustainable going forward, but also Colombia, and they spoke about peace. And I went to the Colombian pavilion here, and there was a lovely quote on the wall, and it said, "Without peace with the planet, there will be no peace among nations." I thought that was very powerful. And so, our work in cultural heritage and sustainability is no exception. In fact, who are we if we have no planet or memory of our deeper traditions and rituals and cultures? What has been particularly exciting in the last couple of years, since the UK held the presidency for COP26, is how we are responding to the threat of climate change through arts, education, and the English language around the world. In arts, we recognise the potential of culture to raise awareness and amplify voices around climate change. Our creative commissions for climate action stimulate global conversations and inspire change by supporting new work and collaborations on art, science and technology. And over the last year, we've had 4 million people engaging in 50 countries with 17 creative commissions. And we've showcased them at COP26 in Glasgow, but also worldwide. This year we have funded seven UK-Egypt creative commissions, 2 global ones, and a UK-Korea-specific partnership, which we are also sharing at COP27. The climate emergency also calls for more sustainable practices, and we are working with our cultural partners to address this through policy dialogues and training, as well as supporting innovation in design, crafts and fashion around material and patterns of consumption. I'm delighted to invite you to discover 2 of our projects later tonight, so make sure you come. It'll be in the green zone at 8 p.m. on the big stage. We don't do things in halves, we only do big stages. So do come along. And since 2019, the Cultural Protection Fund, in partnership with the DCMS, has recognised the importance of protecting tangible and intangible heritage at risk from climate change and related to natural disasters. So the example I spoke about on the East Coast in Kenya, for example. As well as safeguarding cultural heritage for future generations, our work is also about ensuring social and economic resilience and positive impact on the communities connected to their heritage. We take a locally led and people-centered approach to ensure mutual cooperation and learning for long-term solutions to global challenges. And today, we are delighted to make an announcement for the latest round of grants for the Cultural Protection Fund. And I will now pass on to our technological geniuses to share Stephanie Grant's video message for the Cultural Protection Fund. Over to you, Joel.
Yes, Joel slipped in behind me to say a big apology to those viewers online. I don't think you can hear, you won't be able to hear what Steph is saying, but our technical and political geniuses at the back will reinsert it into the YouTube link, which you can watch later. So many apologies for that, but here for you at home are the visuals. No, sorry, it's not subtitles, I do apologise, but here we go. Thank you, Joel.
One leaders and such things as proper are not meant for the people.
No, that's not
So we can send the video on.
In July, we reached the first multi-year large grant scientific consortium, which was clear from a level of demand that we received.
Hello everyone, sorry about this technology issues. We'll definitely share the video with you afterwards, but I will briefly just read the speech from our Director of Cultural Protection Fund on her behalf that I have here with me. So, it's a pleasure to be here. Okay, is better? So, as you may know, the Cultural Protection Fund is led by the British Council in partnership with the UK Government Department of Digital, Culture, Media and Sport, and we support projects which protect heritage at risk due to conflict and instability, but also climate change and natural related disasters. All of these risks are very urgent, as we know and we've been discussing here, growing and interlinked. So we're delighted to share with you that we have funded 17 new large projects which will protect a diverse range of cultural heritage, from buildings to manuscripts to language and music across 15 countries in the Middle East, North and East Africa. In July, we launched our first multi-year large grants round since 2018 due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And it was clear from the level of demand that we received that the threat of climate change to global cultural heritage, ways of life, security and peace is more pressing than ever. This funding round was exceptionally competitive, and we're very proud of the 17 awarded projects. That's around £14 million that has been granted to these projects to deliver important heritage protection activities, which will also have positive societal and economic impact for the local populations. The projects which will continue until March 2025 include the revival of Islamic domes in the historic city of Cairo, where increasing temperatures and excessive flooding are causing significant damage to buildings and infrastructure. There's also the protection of the Bajuni dialect of Swahili in Kenya through oral traditions and poetry, which are at risk of loss due to the impact of climate change on traditional ways of life. And a third project is the rehabilitation of the palace in Kala, Yemen, which is endangered by an ongoing conflict, and along with it, the traditional earth construction methods, which could be the key to slowing down the impact of climate change in the future. And we're also pleased to support an ambitious project led by INTO, which they will work across 6 different countries to restore important sites, build capacity through knowledge exchange and networking, and raise awareness about the impact of climate change. So INTO is an important partner for the Cultural Protection Fund. Their network embodies the ethos of the fund and of the British Council, tackling global challenges more easily when we share knowledge and when we work together internationally. And of course, that's why it is vital that you are all here today at COP27 and addressing the urgent challenge of climate change. So if you're interested to find out more about the Cultural Protection Fund, you can come find me afterwards. My colleague Susan here as well as a grant manager for the fund. And you can always get in touch with us by email. So thank you very much, and I think that's everything.
Thank you so much, Rosanna, for stepping into the breach there. Of course, we're really delighted and excited to be working with the British Council on this really exciting project, which is going to help national trusts in the Middle East and North Africa adapt to climate change, including Egypt, Jordan and Uganda, who we're hearing from today. The project also involves vital knowledge sharing, as Rosanna mentioned, between all the 6 countries and also with the National Trust in England, Wales and Northern Ireland. And some of that learning will be centred around the further development of National Trust adaptation guidance, which we're going to hear about now from Imogen Wood, who is the organisation's Heritage and Climate Consultant. I say now, I'm crossing everything. She is at home in England and will be joining us by the means of Zoom.
You hope.
We can hear you.
Well, that's reassuring. Is that okay? Can you hear me all right? Fab. So I'm Imogen Wood, I'm the Heritage and Climate Consultant for the National Trust. Can you hear me okay?
Perfect.
I'm here to share the launch of our new climate change adaptation guidance, and that's for owners and caretakers of historic and beautiful places such as the ones looked after by the National Trust. So for those who haven't heard of us, we're Europe's biggest conservation charity, and in the face of the climate and nature crises, we've made it a core priority to embed climate action in everything we do. And we've got a race to resilience, so you can see us reduce our emissions net zero by 2030, adapt to climate hazards, capture and sequester carbon in our tree planting and peatland restoration initiatives, and engage people in our work, emphasising the cultural shift needed by everyone to take climate action, which has already been alluded to by the other speakers. Reduce, adapt, capture and engage. We're funding research and pilots at our living lab of over 400 historic places. And we've got 250,000 hectares of land to help us develop pathways and understanding of options and thresholds for change in the face of climate uncertainty, looking after 28,000 buildings and from nearly 800 miles of coastline. So what is the problem we're trying to solve? It's the unprecedented climate risk multipliers experienced in the UK that have recently put our national treasures under threat. Our amazing water features, for example, are running dry, demonstrating the need that we need to adjust how we design and look at how we look after these historic and world-renowned landscapes to make them more resilient to climate change. Disconnected rivers that have been canalised and culverted over centuries, and the associated drainage of their floodplains has halted natural geomorphological processes, again weakening the resilience of our landscape to drought and everything affected by this, whether it's watering livestock or toilet flushing for visitors. And further potential to unlock the pass through waterlogged ecological sites, such as Must Farm, are at risk as well from drying out and degradation of peatlands. The simple infrastructure maintenance that goes along looking after 30,000 kilometres of path needs to resist or at least accept climate change and then direct change. And that's something we're looking to make more sustainable in the future with the increasing frequency and intensity of rainfall. So our people and places are experiencing indoor temperatures of up to 36 degrees, despite working in buildings that are naturally usually quite cool in the summer owing to their traditional construction. So what is the guidance? Well, while we manage these places defined by their ownership of what we're assigned to look after, they're complex systems with multiple assets and activity that coexist with and are interdependent with their surroundings. So recognising that complexity, we still need to break down these places into manageable pieces to understand potential options for adaptation and make those options practical and operations based, where we recognise those thresholds for change. So we're extremely grateful to the RSPB and Natural England, who previously produced adaptation guidance for the natural and farmed environment, because that's what's given us a platform to further develop this approach for the types of sites that we manage at the National Trust. And thanks to our other partners, CADU, the Department of Communities in Northern Ireland, Historic Environment Scotland, Historic England, English Heritage Trust and National Trust of Scotland, we've gathered lots of case studies from all of these places and advice on adaptation of assets already happening at those places. And that's helped us to develop the first of these 14 chapters on adaptation, the types of sites, assets and activity managed by those heritage and countryside tourist organisations to help us plan in the face of uncertainty. And like so many others globally, our places benefit from being protected by statutory designation and in legal frameworks, including our own National Trust Act. And that means we're quite rightly held to account for how we manage and conserve our natural historic environment. But when we need to test those frameworks in the face of unprecedented hazards and impacts exacerbated by climate change, we're working with regulators and others experiencing similar challenges to look at options and innovative conservation approaches that bring the highest public benefit while meeting our core purpose. So we're testing ideas on our own sites, we're working with local communities and members and supporters, statutory bodies and universities to look at options for conservation with new concepts such as adaptive release, developed with Historic England and the University of Exeter, and the importance of old concepts such as basic maintenance and how this is the most important resilience building measure we can all take when looking after our heritage. So we're also working with UCL's Climate Action Unit and the Walker Institute to look at different approaches for adaptive pathway planning. And one example cited in the guidance of water features is the increased rate of siltation of a designed reservoir in a 1956 landscape. We've got various things to contend with. The size of the lake means it's regulated for safety, but it's also a key feature in a Grade 2-star picturesque landscape. And on top of that, it's also designated for its rare lichen assemblage as a site of special scientific interest. So the dynamic adaptive policy pathways approach sets out various options associated with managing this feature to maintain its overall significance to nature, history and people, and recognise potential thresholds for changing its management approach in the future, grounded in the sustainability of those options. It doesn't go as far as selecting the best option for the feature in perpetuity, but it helps managers and consultants to drill down on the best approach for now, considering climate risk multipliers for the management of the site of the future. But developing the guidance takes time, which is why we thought it was important to release this work iteratively, so we continually share, learn and improve our approach and gather feedback from others on whether it's useful in adaptation pathway planning and decision making. So we're building our team at the National Trust to work on this guidance and working with other countries by into and building on lessons from places where climate extremes are affecting heritage so badly and twinning our stories with theirs and helping our sites to create opportunities for engagement through storytelling, interpretation, and that global collaboration of which everyone else has spoken, which impacts us all. So please take the time to look online and help us build on this work by sharing evidence of impact on other assets that need more research and help us to target that future to build resilience and conserve those places which are so special to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Imogen, and thank you for bearing with the sound on that. If you'd like to learn any more about the adaptation guidelines, do talk to Phil, and we can fill you in a little bit on there. What I really love about it is that it's not too technical. It's really based at practitioners, people working at heritage sites, so it's quite accessible. So that's a real plus. So we will move now on to our panel that I'm joined here on the stage by, and really looking forward to hearing a little bit about what they're doing and having a short discussion afterwards. We're going to start with Abdel Hamid from who is the president of the chairman of the Egyptian Heritage Rescue Foundation. And we're delighted that we're going to be working with you on our British Council project imminently. So Abdel Hamid, over to you.
Turn it on.
Thank you so much, Catherine. Thank you actually for our work together with AICU, with British Council. And we always have to thank you, Catherine, our partner. When we have talked together with Catherine before we come here and trying to see what we're going to talk about, after discussion we said that we can discuss quickly an example about fire risk mitigation. But why fire? Because it's happening a lot of historic Cairo. It really damaged a lot of buildings, and I can show you an example where like 187 fire incidents per year, so almost like 25 fire incidents per month. And if you can see, if you can just one click, sorry, the video. It's 1,000. But value because of fire, we have lost many historical buildings because of fire. However, in the last 10-15 years, and because fire start to have more high temperature, and also in winter start to have high heavy rains, so fire start to happen a lot. So next please. So we cannot, according to our capacity, we cannot fight against fire. But what we can, not in general, I mean about our capacity as Egyptian Heritage Rescue Foundation, but to say let's analyze the situation, let's make a risk assessment, and we discover that we have source of risk, which is hazard, which is fire, and vulnerabilities. We cannot fight against the hazard because of our limited, but we can fight against the vulnerability. We found that fire can have many ignition sources, but it reached all the urban fabric because of the risk bus filled out of the solid wastes, as you see in this photo here. So the solution was so simple. If we just block this risk bus, if we just remove these solid wastes, it means that we will prevent fire from extension. And actually we are applying this since May 2017 till now, and I can tell you that we, according to our records, according to our measures, we reduce fire incidents in this area, which is called Al-Adha and Al-Ghuri, and it has 87 historical buildings, from 187 fire incidents per year to 3 fire incidents per year, only with a very small intervention like this. And if you can make next, I'm sorry. Okay. And this actually, it's like a win-win situation. We block the fire, we mitigate the fire, and at the same time, with the cooperation with the Ministry of Antiquities, we can open almost 30 or 34 sites for visits before the ministry will close it because they cannot do some maintenance, and actually with this, and by the way, it costs almost nothing, like $400 or $500 per month, and this is just self-funded from my team. So while we are doing this, we discover also that climate change is not something really far from us. And according to many researchers, that not just us, but according to other colleagues in Egypt, in abroad, in our with our partners, we found that we have, if you can go next, please. We have to be partner in many projects in order to understand, digest this climate and how the vulnerability is going to accelerate a lot of hazards, not just in Egypt, but in the whole world. So we choose with ICRAM and we applied together for a project called Net Zero. And it's how to use health and culture to come up with adaptation and mitigation plan to reduce the risks that come up from climate change actually. And this one we are trying now, and we choose this Zeta City, and by the way, Simon also a part of this working group, but in Uganda. So we are trying to generate knowledge. We bring back the old knowledge, the heritage knowledge, the cultural knowledge, and use it in a good way to reduce the risks for climate change. I'm sorry I take a little bit long, okay? And thank you again, okay? Thank you, Ento, thank you, British Council.
Thank you so much, Abdul Hamid. We'll come to some questions shortly, but we're going to move on. I think just reminding again how important to be having this conversation on the day of Action for Climate Empowerment here at COP27. So, our next speaker is Sarah Sutton, who's the CEO of Environment and Culture Partners in the United States. So over to you, Sarah.
Thank you very much, Catherine. It's very nice to be able to host this event with you. One thing that the UN does at this time brings so many people together that otherwise wouldn't have a chance to work so closely. So the partnership with you has been the beginning of good things. So thank you. So I'm going to talk to you about two federal grant programs, two federal grant projects in the United States. But I want to center you a little bit on what the cultural sector looks like in the U.S. So there are 35,000 museums in the United States. There are actually 95,000 National Register historic sites. So we're a pretty substantial sector. They call us a subnational sector, and that'll be important later. We contribute $50 billion to the U.S. economy just through museums, zoos, gardens, and historic sites. And 850 million people visit us in a year. But you might not realize that we are not federally funded. Museums and other informal learning institutions do not get direct support from the government. We get our money through a mix of gate, gifts, and grants. And there are 4 agencies that make those grants mostly to museums. Institute of Museum and Library Services, the National Science Foundation, the National Endowment for the Arts, and the one I'm going to focus on, the National Endowment for the Humanities. But remember, I'm a subnational actor. I am not actually staff of the National Endowment for Humanities, but I'm an advocate for the work they do. And I want to tell you about that. I'm helping cultural heritage get this work done. This is the first one, the Climate Smart Humanities Organizations Grant, brand new, offered 2 weeks before Stephanie Shapiro and I got on the plane to come here. And it's a $6 million annual matching grant to support climate heritage assessments and strategic plans for humanities organizations. At colleges and universities, in museums, in libraries, at tribal cultural centers, so that they can make their own plans to take climate action. The one caution I'd say about this and the U.S. federal grant funding is that it usually requires a match of some kind. And that's currently the way in which this program works and others do. And for those of you listening, thinking about creating funding programs in your countries, please remember that the matching part creates an inaccessibility for our institutions. So hopefully after what we've heard so much at COP about new approaches to funding, that there will be different ways that we start to do that work. I'd like to tell you about one other project. This is also funded by the National Endowment for the Humanities. This is Climate Resilience Resources for Cultural Heritage. So this is an extension of an existing grant funded by the National Endowment for Humanities to the American Institute for Conservation that was studying the future of cultural heritage in the United States. And what does it need in order to adapt to the future, climate altered or not? And out of the 9 target areas, climate is what came up most often. And so even before that other project was done, we created this project that will create a suite of resources for communities to do their own planning for their cultural resources. So it has an ArcGIS map so that you can individually go and show your allies and your partners what the risks are now and in the future to your cultural heritage site. And then it provides learning modules and communities of practice to support those agencies in making their own decisions about what a resilient future looks like for them. So I see both of these as really hopeful opportunities for the cultural sector in the U.S. Not enough, but good progress. And I appreciate that we're starting to step up and take advantage of the opportunity. May it lead to more funding. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. That's brilliant. And a lot of synergies between what you and Imogen were saying about data and those things. So that's perfect. The INTO members around the world look after places of nature, beauty, and history across the globe, and many of them are facing very severe climate impacts, but they're facing them with a wealth of knowledge in how to adapt to such hazards through traditional techniques, materials, and technologies. And so I'm delighted to hand over to Simon Musazizi, who's the Programme Manager at the Heritage Trust within the Cross-Cultural Foundation of Uganda, to tell us a little bit about his work.
Thank you so much, Catherine. We are excited that this project has been launched finally. My presentation is backward looking at the works we've done. We are not sure if the next phase is going to be launched, but we are excited that it has been unveiled today. My name is Simon Musasiye. I work with the Cross-Cultural Foundation of Uganda. It's a member organization of the INTO, and we are excited to be here. We do a lot of work, but I'll focus on our work on climate change and its impact on heritage resources. I hope the slide will be able to show maybe the next one. So we've been working around the Rwenzori National Park. It's a World Heritage Property. It's the 3rd highest point on the African continent, and one of those places where you can find snow on the equator. Unfortunately, some of the photos have not been catered for. So if you want to see the impact of climate change, if you have doubts, the Rwenzori is the place to see. We've been talking about, research has been showing that we had 7.5 square kilometers of snow, but it has been reducing because of global warming, and now we are talking about 1.5 square kilometers. In 2012, we had unprecedented fire that went as high as 4,000 meters above sea level. This was unheard of in our country, that you can have fire going to the colder regions of the mountain. It burnt over 4,000 hectares of forest. So of recent, I'm trying to summarize, we've been having, the rivers have been flowing down with huge boulders and destroying towns, villages, gardens, and so on. So we worked in 2020, we got support from British Council, and together with our partner, the International National Trust Organization, we embarked on a project that we called Melting Snow and Rivers in Floods. So we were able to understand how the communities are being affected, how our heritage is being affected, because when these disasters happen, a lot of focus is on the number of people that have been, like the lives that have been lost, the property that has been lost, but no one has been paying attention on the impact on cultural heritage. So we were able to work with the Bakonjo people. They are one of the ethnic groups that neighbors the Rwenzori National Park. When the park was gazetted as a forest reserve in the 40s during the colonial period, it was gazetted for its natural value. And indeed, when it was inscribed by UNESCO in 1994 as a World Heritage Property, it was still for the natural value. So there was a disconnect between the community and the park because the cultural values were not being, in their opinion, were not being appreciated. So what we've been doing is to try and document the cultural heritage sites plus their intangible cultural heritage within the national park, but also the surrounding areas. And that has given us a lot of knowledge. We've been able to understand that actually climate change has been having impact on people's culture. People are shifting away from their heritage because the Bakonjo have strong attachment to water bodies and snow. But now with these floods, they are settling far away from their heritage. And that has impact on their way of life. They are reduced now to living in camps. We are seeing small towns, we could call them shanty towns coming up, where people are crowded and trying to live a different life. So what we did was to go back to the community and be able to understand what are those cultural resources that they are able to use to mitigate against the impact of climate change. So the site you see in the picture there is called Ixalachakololo, and it was one of those sites that was swept by the floods. But the community was able to build it back. It is located just a few kilometers from the national park. If you could go back to the other pictures. Then we were also able to identify indigenous trees that can be planted to hold the rivers from bursting. So that tree you see below is a wonder tree, it's the bamboo. The bamboo now are left in the higher altitude, but the community is now planting it down to be able to control the rivers from exploding. We were also able to share knowledge with the National Trust in the UK, and the picture you see on your left, we were trying to pilot with what we call the leaky dam. That was our first leaky dam, and it's still standing. We are going to monitor how it does. Yeah, over the years we'll be able to monitor how it works. And what you see on your right is a nursery bed. People were able to plant, to develop, to make seedlings, to put up nursery beds where they can reproduce seedlings to be able to plant as many as possible. On the next phase, which has been announced, I haven't shared the photos, but yes, it is going to give us a chance to be able to understand the impact of climate change in historic buildings. We've been doing a lot of work in our country to try and preserve historic buildings, because we know that in our country most people think that cities should look like Dubai or New York or something with skyscrapers. So most of the buildings have already been put down. So we've been producing maps, documenting and producing maps of historic buildings in our cities. So this gives us an opportunity to restore an historic building and give it new meaning. So it's a great opportunity for us to work on this project and be able to restore an historic building. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Simon. Brilliant, lovely photos as well. So we'll talk a little bit more about your work when we get to the discussion. But now it's, again, a huge honour to introduce Shannon Shear-Miller, who is the Historic Preservation Director of the City of San Antonio in the United States. Over to you, Shannon.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be joining this panel today and speak to you a little bit about an initiative that we adopted in San Antonio that is our Deconstruction and Circular Economy Initiative. The City Council just adopted in September a deconstruction ordinance that requires that if residential buildings over a certain age are to be removed, that they must be deconstructed rather than mechanically demolished. Let me tell you what that means. Demolition is the practice of removing a structure with heavy machinery, and it results in a lot of waste and very little material recovery, and all of that ends up in the landfill. Deconstruction, on the other hand, is the process of basically unbuilding a structure, so taking it apart the way it went together, and what that allows for is the ability to retain a lot of that material for reuse. First, there are several issues in San Antonio that made this deconstruction ordinance important. Over the past 10 years, more than $16 million worth of material has been sent to the local landfill. And this amounts to about 170,000 tons of irrecoverable resources. More than 500 buildings are demolished in San Antonio annually, and that number is increasing every year. It's a 68% increase since 2012. The areas where these pre-1960 residential structures are being demolished are near our central city, and this is particularly critical when you think about it from a public health and equity standpoint, because of the impacts to the air quality and even our groundwater due to lead particles in the air. And all of these bad effects of the air pollution are underscored by the number of ozone action days that we're experiencing at an unprecedented rate. Next slide. We like to emphasize this organ donor analogy. We know that buildings sometimes will come down, but when they do, the parts and pieces of those buildings can be used to extend the life of other historic buildings in our community. We also see these materials as a source of embedded local value of cultural importance because of what went into building these structures. And it also helps us to have a source of material for those rehabilitations and even new construction, instead of relying collectively on brand new materials and the carbon impacts associated with producing and distributing those materials. In addition to the environmental benefits of deconstruction, there are many other social and cultural benefits of removing buildings in a different way. More jobs, more materials available for local repair, and the retention of that cultural heritage. We also have a priority in our program to support the repair and production of affordable housing in our community. This is another important aspect of community resilience, and we see these two issues as deeply tied together. We also have a focus, which you can see in the photos, on workforce development. Most of these photos are taken during our demolition contractor training. The photo on the bottom is a photo of a student in our Living Heritage Trades Academy that is learning about traditional trades, and all of the material that comes as a result of our deconstruction ordinance will go at no cost into trades education and into workforce development. And the beauty of the workforce development component is that it is recognized by our community's workforce development agency, which means that the people participating in the Trades Academy also receive wraparound services to help them be able to launch into that new career. Another aspect that you see in the bottom left-hand photo is the site of our Material Innovation Center. The Material Innovation Center is really our last stop before the landfill concept, and that is where these materials, if the market doesn't take them in some other way, the materials will come to the Material Innovation Center. And through that program, we'll be able to put those materials into affordable housing projects in the city and reduce procurement costs for those materials as well. We are also working through the Innovation Center to develop partnerships with local universities, to look at research for creating new materials out of the salvage materials if they can't be reused as they are when they come out of the houses. And then also developing opportunities for new construction like accessory dwelling units with the salvage material. So the anticipated outcomes of the adoption of the ordinance are, of course, improved equity and accessibility to material, the generation of local jobs in the reuse industry, in deconstruction and warehousing, even in retailing, trades, and in value-added manufacturing. This advances the city's climate action and adaptation goals related to waste reduction, and also the advancement of the city's affordable housing goals. And so in the first year, we do know that we will see climate action through waste reduction. Over 10,000 tons of material, of salvaged material, will be diverted from landfills. We'll be training at least 40 people in the first year in a new field of deconstruction. We also believe that this is an important aspect of our community's pre-disaster preparation, so that we have a ready source of materials that does not need to travel from who knows where. It's locally available and locally sourced. And then again, we will be reducing the cost of affordable housing production in our city by using these salvage materials. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shannon. A really fascinating example of a city leading the way for us NGOs around the world. I'm quite intrigued to ask about sort of policy development, and so when we in the NGO world come up with a good solution that we think might work, you got any tips for us on how we could work with government sort of institutions and to see them through? What could you share?
Sure, that was a wonderful question, and yes, I mean, it is kind of unusual in the United States, and I think in many countries, there aren't very many cities that have an ordinance like this. And the only way that it was able to be done was by partnering with a number of people in the community. Of course, nonprofit organizations and advocacy organizations, but also people like demolition contractors and real estate professionals, and the whole gamut of neighborhood and community activists, because it was something that we had to really think through the impact of. And so I think that's what's important from the local government perspective, is really involving as many voices as possible in the development of the policy, so that we're anticipating issues that might arise. And we were very careful to work with those partners to anticipate questions that would come up through the adoption process and make sure we had an answer for them. And that's really how we arrived at our deconstruction contractor training and our Material Innovation Center, because the question was always, where's all this material going to go, if not the landfill? And so we had to come up with a response to that as well.
Thank you. I think that shows just, we are ingenious people, and when we work together, we can make magic happen. So thank you for that. Now, I've got some more questions for the rest of the team. We haven't practiced this, so they don't know what order they're coming in, but I'm going to start. Going to ask Simon. Can you tell us a little bit about the challenges that you've been navigating as you integrate traditional knowledge into climate change mitigation methods? Can you tell us a little bit about that? Some of the challenges. What's difficult in what you do? John.
That's fine.
And I should also say, sorry, we have Imogen back on the panel as well, and that's we'll have a question for you in a minute, Imogen. Go, Simon.
Yeah. So. One of our challenges has been limited information or data on the impact of climate change on intangible cultural heritage, but even generally, data on climate change around East Africa and Central Africa is quite limited. There's a project that we are into is Abdul, the net zero one. And one of the things we are doing is to do background research, looking for data as far as 500 years ago. You cannot find it around East Africa. So if you cannot find climate change data, the trends, then it's even more difficult to find information on the impact of climate change on intangible cultural heritage. So that has been one of our challenges. We know that there are studies being done on for example, the impact of climate change on historic buildings, materials of buildings are being studied in the labs, but we studied the impact of climate change on intangible cultural heritage. It's not there. The other one is the intensity with which climate change is affecting the people around is so great. Some rivers have busted so many the width is so big. So we chose to work with a small river, with a small community, to be able to see how they can go back in their way of life, in a simple way of life, to be able to adjust, to adapt back to climate change. But the intensity is so high that the rivers we cannot work. For example, if you Google Nyamwamba River, if you wanted to make interventions there, I don't know what you would do, because the rocks are so big. Even if you are desilting the rivers, you would spend so much money on that. I think the other one has been the issue of, should I call it popular culture, that we found sometimes some people thought if you go back into your way of life, it's against religion, it's against your education, and so on. So we found some people who are knowledge bearers, some of them thought it wasn't right to be going back to think of our ways back, how we used to live. They thought maybe it was against religion and so on. And maybe lastly, there are so many challenges, but in the interest of time, I think the other one is the land ownership. I think what is happening is that when people are pushed away, there are other people that come to grab the land. So the land is changing ownership. So for some sites, we found difficult in terms of putting together the landowners to be able to work together. But again, we found that heritage is actually the pull factor in terms of social cohesion. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That's those are great points scribbled down here. And I wondered whether Imogen wanted to come in really on the data side and how that's playing into the adaptation guidance.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Just wondering if you could, you had any reflections on what Simon was saying on the role of data?
I feel the role of data is absolutely essential in trying to build and adapt and develop pathways going forward. I mean, our biggest problem is that we can't wait to get the data absolutely perfect for all of our sites. And, you know, I listed some statistics around how much we have to look after at the National Trust in England, Wales and Northern Ireland. And the reality is that if we waited for all our data to be perfect on all of these, we wouldn't be adapting anytime soon. But part of the reason for doing pathways approaches is that they're iterative and you don't get locked in and you don't make decisions based on bad data, but you can start to look at ideas and opportunities for adapting and think about the sort of resilience, cost benefit, co-benefit and negative impacts and trade-offs of those measures to think, okay, what's my best approach in the short term, and then where might we be in the medium term, and what are those thresholds for change? So I think having data to underpin that decision making is essential. Does the data have to be perfect for you to get going? No, but do have a background plan to actually be improving that data. I mean, there was a great presentation last week in the Pakistan Pavilion, which was all about the glacier melt in the Himalayas and 9,000 glaciers, which are really poorly monitored by only satellite data. And actually that's nothing compared to being able to talk to communities and people affected on the ground. And I think there's the big data that we're getting from the satellites, and then there's qualitative data that we have to get from the people affected by these awful hazards, which again is why we're trying to work with the countries via Into to make sure that we're building off that knowledge where people are being affected and where this is affecting real communities and not just things.
Yes, thank you. When I came here, I sat on a plane between a management consultant and a banker, and they were talking a lot about data, and it was sort of going over my head as they were talking about it. But I totally agree but what you said, Imogen, not waiting for the data to be perfect. It's I can see it's a really important role. Now, Sarah, I'm going to ask you a little bit about the examples of federal agency support to cultural heritage that you shared. And I wondered, what factors do you think have led to this investment and at this moment? What are the underlying factors behind those investments?
I think there was a desperate moment when President Trump took the United States out of the Paris Agreement, and we felt all of a sudden as it would. Thank you. We realized all of a sudden that we would just have to carry all the banners ourselves. And so the subnational sector, everyone not in the federal government, started picking up their skirts and getting the work done. And we started to realize pretty quickly that one sector to another were engaging in this in a way they hadn't before. And I remember thinking, that's it, I'm going to Canada. And then you stay here and you solve the problem. And so I called neighbors and I called colleagues, I called clients, and I said, are you still going to do this work? And they all said yes. And so we became a little bit of a culture movement that wanted to take climate action. And then I heard that there was something called We Are Still In, where business and higher ed and faith and health and other organizations were getting together, and culture needed to be part of that. And I knocked on the door until they said yes, that we would be part of that. Now we fast forward, we get to President Biden, and he's ready to put us back into the Paris Agreement. The reason he can enact all these things is because for the last 4 years, the cultural sector and all of the other sectors have been building the muscle to do this work. So now it's perfect timing that the whole of government and the whole of society can team up. So when those folks at the federal level were ready to do the next cycle of funding, they knew that there were applicants to do the work. There were people who were going to say, yes, we can do this, we know how to do it, and we know where to do it. So we were ready at the moment that they were back in business. And I think it's given us a great partnership. We won't cede authority ever again. We are going to continue to lead on culture and keep pushing and prodding. And when the government doesn't do as much as we'd like, we'll keep asking them for more, and we'll keep expanding our own power of organizing this work. And so that's really how Environment and Culture Partners came to be what it is now, working with you.
Thank you. So I'm going to turn to another funder to quiz Skinder a little bit on the Cultural Protection Fund. So why culture and the arts? Tell us a little bit about that. Why does it sit within the arts portfolio? Cultural protection, sorry.
Yes, it's a good question. I mean, it's an important part of what we do. So cultural protection is the protection of our heritage. And the way I suppose we theorize this is that heritage and our traditions are what form the kind of, borrowing from Sarah, the muscle behind our memory of who we are. So this memory of who we are defines, in a sense, the kind of idiosyncrasies of a culture. That is what makes our connections deeper, when we understand how we're distinctly different, but how we connect in binding spaces. Those binding spaces is what we're protecting, therefore. And at the moment, when I think about art and contemporary art, it's often sometimes in battle with ritual, tradition, heritage, and it's provoking a new way of looking at it. But actually protecting what we are, who we are, is our genetic memory that lives in the day we're in. Once we start losing this, I think we're on a dodgy slope of just information assertion as opposed to wisdom and knowledge, or the kind of spirit of being who we are and where we're from in the age of contemporary exchange. So that's why, I hope I answered your question. I feel like I'm in a dream now. Yes.
I've got a follow-up question about whether the Cultural Protection Fund will move beyond the Middle East and North Africa.
Exciting. Well, look, I mean, we started here because there was a driver for change was very much about the situation of conflict and protection around that. It's definitely expanded with the climate problems. We've seen recently droughts in Africa. We've also seen floods in Pakistan. Very significant shifts and changes, and a lot of things at threat. Be them craft, be them cultures, you know, in terms of our languages, our buildings, our defining aspects of human civilization. So there is a need to always look at where the gaps are in the world we're in. Just coming back from Mondial recently as well, we heard from the declaration a really strong drive for the protection of African heritage alongside our indigenous ancient cultures, which were, you know, preserving a knowledge that's easily bypassed and bulldozed by all sorts of reasons, literally as much as the modernity of mankind or humankind. So the expansion of things like cultural protection fund can only be a good thing. I think one of the challenges for us is that we've got to look at, you know, broader partnerships as well, not rely just on governments and money. We've got to look at our partners who are in this room, or actually this series of sheds. There are plenty of big corporate players here who have a responsibility to play an active role. In fact, yesterday I came across a really interesting project, and it was a project between the Alpine Corporation and an NGO looking at issues around protecting women who could not find money to pay for their sanitation project. And it was called Period Poverty, the actual theme or the situation. But the partnership was very powerful. The partnership was powerful because the textiles company were making money out of textiles, but realizing that they were in locations where there were major problems. There were people selling their bodies in order to pay for their sanitation. Such an extreme example, I know, but really painful to listen to. But you can imagine the people in that situation. So that public-private partnership was a really interesting example. But there are many more. You know, private investment into cultural protection is a really important part of how we go forward, and our corporate partnerships, and how we ethically create solutions, I think.
Yes, thank you. Yes, so the importance of partnerships. Shannon, you also mentioned that, and I know Abdul Hamid, the importance of working in partnerships in virus mitigation as well. Can you tell us a little bit about, you know, what the relationship is between climate action and your commercial and residential activities, and with poor management of urban heritage?
When we thought about our project, the very first step is to do stakeholder mapping, how to map the relation between them, to understand what is happening there. So it's not about poor management in historic Cairo, it's about that there is no teamwork. There is no capacity actually to manage this huge heritage there. The relation between the government and the community is not good at all. There is no cooperation between both of them. And also the other research institute. We found one research or two research talking about some people research and make a climate measures and their impact on historic Cairo, and mainly to the stone building, and the relation to the increase of fire incidents, And actually these 2 or 3 persons in the scientific academy prove it, it's a relation actually. But not just because of the main vulnerability of the climate change, but actually it's too much connected with the human and commercial activity in the area there. So to find something to solve this matrix of problem between government, between community, commercial, management of historical sites there, which is totally non-professional, and also with something that we all basically just with the climate change, it was really a big challenge, not just for us, but also for the government. We see that according to the records that in the last, as I said before, 10-15 years, fire accidents start to be more huge problem in Cairo, not because only climate change, but also because of the poor waste management. So all of these factors together make like a kind of a bad relationship, and the impact is that we're losing our heritage and also we're losing the relation with our community. So this is more or less the answer to your question, Pastor.
I'll try this one again, thank you. Your beautiful palace in Cairo, it's going to be part of the project, has an important green space in it. I think actually this is a question to the whole panel. When we think a little about the importance of nature and culture and the green access that we've all seen over the pandemic, how important it was to get out into green space, and I'm quite interested, that nature, culture, climate kind of nexus. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Exactly, and I would add community, so nature, culture, heritage, and community with this. Actually, 20 years ago, or something like this, where we will evaluate some heritage management projects, some restoration projects, we found that this people really doesn't like to green. Okay, they said, okay, green things are affecting and impacting heritage in a very bad way. So it's a cut the trees, let's take off the palm trees away from heritage science, away from soil Cairo. So we all need some new kind of education. We all need to find that heritage is not against nature, nature is not against culture, both are not against the community, and this is a big important milestone and big important objective of our project that we are going to do together is connect between all of this along with the community and also to fill the gap, the untrust gap between the surrounding community and with our heritage. So this is one of our objectives that we're building together.
Simon Johnson. Oh, Imogen, do you want to say a few words on nature and culture?
Sure. I think it's just really important to remember that the natural environment is our historic environment. And I think that trying to manage the two independently or rather separately is impossible, because you will always affect the other one, and by not taking into account the different impacts, I suppose, on the different significances of those things, whether that's people or nature or history and heritage and culture, you're basically setting yourself up to fail and upset somebody. So it doesn't mean to say that there won't be compromises, but it certainly doesn't mean that you can't find synergies. And I think that a previous organisation that has been really good at that has been Natural England, and being able to find the way through that works for the environment and nature. And when I went to Beit al-Azaz in March this year, I mean, it was fantastic to see this amazing bit of Egyptian heritage that the tourists from certainly in the UK don't get to see, and I think that people would certainly love to come and see that little green oasis in this beautiful palace, which it's great to see has already been saved to some extent by the HRF. So yeah, fantastic work.
Okay, I'll add my voice. I think for Uganda, that was a very trying moment, because our houses are not built for us. We basically live in the sort of in nature. So to be confined in the houses, it was really a very stressing moment for many people. And that we are told right now that mental health is one of the biggest problems at the moment in Uganda as a country. because for us, nature is everything. The trees are everything. It's where we get the herbal medicine. I know that during that time we had to go back. It's the herbal medicine that was providing treatment for us. The trees are a source of handcraft making. It is what defines our settlement. For example, for the Makonde, you just look at a particular species and you'll be able to know the settlement over the years. So it was really a trying moment to be confined in the houses without access to the environment that we call home.
I think that's something we all share, don't we?
Yes, this is a big subject right now. Nature, culture and art. We've only got, I'll be 1 minute then. So, during the lockdown, you're right, Catherine. I mean, nature became really, really important. As did chocolate, as did culture and art. I think they're fundamental prerequisites of our existence when it comes to a moment of trauma in particular, but actually just defining ourselves in our everyday. There is something we seek, and that is to understand who we are. There's nothing better than the contemplative space of nature. That's why I'm such a big fan of the National Trust, because within it you have this wonderful undulating landscapes, the preservation of beautiful trees, plants, great teams that receive you, specialists in how they deal with dogs even. It's such an amazing mix. And at the heart of it is also the heritage of these amazing buildings, these histories that sit within these landscapes. This is what makes a place. This is what defines us as well as the kind of contemporary abstract expressionism that's also necessary in disrupting the status quo. But sometimes we just need a bit of calm, and therefore protecting our nature, our spiritual land is so, so important. And that's why I'm such a big fan of this synchronicity between nature, culture, art, and yes, a bit of chocolate too.
Can we have wine also? So picture a Hawaiian island. This is just before COVID, and so imagine an island, a mountain in the middle, and the water surrounding it. A traditional space there on the land is called an ahupua'a, and it starts in a narrow point at the top of the mountain and spreads as you get down to the water and involves part of the water. And in that whole ecosystem is enough to sustain all of the people in that clan or group that are living in that space. But one of the things we've lost is that in Hawaii, fish ponds, there are 5 different types of fish ponds. The one I'm talking about is in the water at the time. So imagine 80 acres of water enclosed in order for safe fishing inside the reef. No one has to get in a boat and go out. And we don't use those anymore because we can haul the fish off in big trawlers, right? But the nature culture value is restoring that way of life for the community and a much more sustainable food source. But this 800-year-old community space had been breached 50 years ago by a hurricane and left to just fill in. The mangrove trees came in, which actually was a bad thing. I was surprised to find. The mangrove trees filled it in, the silt came in, and it was no longer used for fishing. But the local nonprofit, subnational cultural power, is restoring it. And all of us would go to the shore and with our hands pass rocks, pass wood, do digging, pull up the mangroves, and restore this site. At the beginning of our work, we would form a circle and we'd each say our name into the history of the place. We'd work for our day, we'd gather for lunch, and just as we were leaving, someone would come in and sell us all fresh fish off the back of a truck. It was a marvelous way to restore nature and culture at the same time and ourselves.
That's brilliant. I'm afraid we're going to have to call it to a close now, though. So thank you all. Thank you to my speakers, who will be brilliant. Thank you for everybody putting up with the tech. I think we've heard a lot We've heard a lot about the importance of international collaboration. Here we are, about partnerships, about nature and culture. And I don't know if you know about how you apply for these spaces, but you put something online and then you get hooked up with another group. And I think it's been really enlightening and fabulous to find that there is so much that ties us all together, and we can really make a difference when we collaborate and learn and share from one another. And so thank you all, thank you for coming. And there were two adverts in this discussion. Firstly, for the British Council event at 8 o'clock this evening in the Green Zone, and secondly, the Princess Diana at 3 o'clock on Thursday here in the Blue Zone. Please ask us if you need details of that, because we can put you on the list. Thank you all so much, and happy rest of COP.
If anyone has further questions for the speakers, we're going to be gathering out by the grab and go just over the other side of this room. So do come and join us for a coffee and a chat. Thank you.